it's no longer good enough to try and sustain what we have left. We have to regenerate. And we know that the more farmers that get into regenerative agriculture-based farming, the more everybody wins.
Today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Becca Griffith. She is a practicing naturopath, and she also has an incredible story of healing from serious chronic illness. And she's a member of the team at Northstar Bison, which is a regenerative farm that's located in Wisconsin. Today we're going to be talking about the difference between conventionally raised chicken and regeneratively raised chicken. Becca is just a wealth of knowledge, and I'm really looking forward to learning from her today, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it as well. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into our discussion. Hi, Becca. Thanks so much for joining me today. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and explain your role at Northstar Bison?
Yeah. So I've been working as a health practitioner since about 2008. Really got into that because of just my own health journey. And then with Northstar Bison, I play, we really haven't settled on an actual official title, but basically I do the communications and I bring in that natural health perspective into my role, and helping guide customers as well of why our food and how we raise our food is nutritionally dense, or nutrient dense, as most people say. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Becca. I'm really excited to learn from you. So let's go ahead and jump into our discussion about chicken. So could you start by just explaining the difference between conventional chicken and pasture-raised chicken?
Yeah, so there are so many different avenues when it comes to chicken, and just the food industry in general is how far we've come from how we used to do things ancestrally.
Right.
And now we've got this situation where anyone who goes into the grocery store, if they're really looking for nutritional food, it's so confusing because of the labeling, and nobody really knows what's going on behind the scenes, because you can look at a label, but it doesn't show how or what an animal has been given, how they're treated, what goes on just all of those categories. So with that, the conventional chickens, it's typically a CAFO type of an operation, CAFO being CAFO, confined animal feeding operation,
Right. Okay.
also known as a concentration camp for animals. And it's really,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so sad, but it's true, because it's almost like calling it a factory farm still sounds too kind compared to what they do to these animals. And farmers that I've talked to who have stepped into the regenerative agriculture realm, like Northstar Bison is in, that farmers who've ever had experience on those conventional type factory farms with chickens, it's basically a hazmat suit experience. The ammonia that's in the air, going through every day, picking up dead chickens because they can't even handle the environment they're in. And
Wow.
it's just, yeah, it's terrible. And the food rations, it's all over the place. They're given a lot of garbage, and often those chickens will be forced to be cannibals, where other ground up, there could have been their little chicken mate the day before, and ground up and forced as part of their feeding rations. So there's those elements, a lot of corn and soy that they're given. So they're inflamed from that diet, and so that inflammation also gets passed on to us as the eaters, if that's the type of chickens that we buy. Then if you go into chickens that are part of the regenerative agriculture, when they're out on the pasture, there's grubs, there's bugs, there's worms, there's a variety of grasses, the soil is alive. They're also given rations because, chickens unlike ruminant animals like bison and cattle and sheep, all of that, where they're supposed to only eat grass. Chickens are meant to eat grains. That's what the gizzard is specifically designed for. It's also known as its second stomach. That's happens on the, as a side note, that just happens to be high in vitamin A, selenium, and B6 and B12. So don't throw away the gizzard if you can get one.
It's no.
So yeah, so it's a huge difference that any living being, if they're outside, they're being given the choice of what they are able to eat, and in an ancestral way, then they're going to be producing a nutrient density for us as the humans when we're eating them, that we benefit from them as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And one of the reasons that I reached out and wanted to talk with you about this is because of how impressed I am with Northstar and the practices that you guys use with all of your animals. And so I guess I was just hoping maybe you could go into how Northstar raises their chickens specifically. And I know you mentioned that they should be fed grain, but what are the specifics with that? I see a lot, what chickens shouldn't be fed, like soy and corn, but I wasn't exactly sure what the specifics are of what should be in their diet. So
Yeah. So what we do is we really try to go as native as we can with our chickens. And so as I had mentioned before, we do the regenerative agriculture, and so the chickens that we're raising, they are out on the green pasture, and they are getting the grubs and the bugs, and having their choice to peck away, and then we also give them a ration.
okay.
And so the ration does not have any corn. It does not have any soy. And one thing too that I'll have to jump back into involving the corn, that I think is an interesting avenue for people to hear about. But to finish on the rations, our chickens are also being given some crab meal, fish meal, sunflower meal. They're getting some enzymes. They're also getting some vitamins and minerals as well. So we make sure that they're getting a complete nutritional profile. If we have a bigger picture of how far removed from where we came from and what we used to do, and how much as a cultural system we've botched everything up.
Yeah.
And that with corn in general, corn and soy, what we're dealing with today, the bulk majority of it is genetically modified. If it's genetically modified, it's also getting sprayed with a lot of chemicals, the herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and anything that is an iside. Iside is Latin for to kill. So it's not like it's spot destroying only the negative parts. It's killing off the good things, it's killing off the bad things. But so it's a double whammy when you've got something that's already been genetically manipulated in a lab, cellular structures changed, altered from its original form. But going back thousands of years, the original corn plant was called teosinte, Teosinte, and it was raised as this bushy grass in central Mexico. And it was about 5 to 12 kernels high. It wasn't like the ear that we see.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it was about 5 to 12 high, and they had shells on them. And if you broke the shell, it was like an acorn-like shell, and on the inside of it, it was it's double the protein that corn today has, and it had much less starch. And then as time progressed, there was some natural hybridization that people were able to do, that it didn't take a machine to do it. So nature allowed it. And then when we got into the super sweet corn, that actually had to do with radiation from an atomic bomb that was purposely set out with animals, bags of corn, and being affected by the radiation and then stored for decades later. Someone wanted to experiment and planted these super irradiated corn, and it happened to become super sweet. So it got marketed. And then
Wow.
it's just, how many layers of wrong can we develop? And
Yeah. No
yeah, and
kidding.
then we have all these different varieties of corn, because the corn that's genetically modified is typically not very tasty anyways, and that's what tends to get thrown into a lot
Okay.
of feed rations, and then there's the glyphosate. So adding one more thing to that, besides that, we don't do the corn, we don't do the soy in our rations, but every bag of ration that is involved, every batch, I should say, is tested for glyphosate to
Oh,
make
wow.
sure that there is no glyphosate going into the chickens. So besides that, they're getting this wide range variety of goodies to eat, we're also making sure that there is the absence of chemicals. So multiple reasons on why our chicken tastes really good, but also how people are going to feel really good from eating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm impressed. I wanted to hear your thoughts on, is chicken inflammatory? Should it be considered inflammatory? This is kind of a topic that I've seen a lot of mixed opinions about. And how important is it that chicken are not fed corn and soy?
Yeah. So yeah, I've seen the raging debate out in so many different communities about chicken being good or not. And I think it's with everything. There is a good version and there is a bad version of it, and it all depends on how it's raised.
Right.
So it's really as simple as that. If any animal, and chickens, specifically for this topic, if they are given that wide-ranging diet, if they're outdoors, that they're not forced to stay, you know, confined in with their feces, day in and day out, and all the ammonia and just not being able to roam the land, then yeah, they're going to be inflamed. And as I mentioned earlier too, then we're going to be inflamed because it just doesn't go away, even though you could look at two different types of chickens, one coming from a conventional farm or factory. I can't call it a farm. And another one coming from a regenerative agriculture based farm. And they might look very similar, but the way it interacts in the body, our bodies are intelligently designed. And so how they react to something that also was intelligently designed, but depending on what it was fed, is going to have two astronomically different reactions in our bodies. So yeah, I don't find that regenerative agriculture based chicken, really truly pastured chicken, is going to have the inflammatory reactions as other type of chickens that weren't appropriately
Yeah,
raised.
that makes sense. I mean, I've experienced it even in my own journey. I ended up cutting out chicken quite a few months ago, and then was able to reintroduce corn and soy-free chicken. I've done great with it.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
um, yeah, it's a really cool thing. And I guess I was wondering if you would even consider, appropriately and regeneratively raised chicken to be anti-inflammatory.
I think so. I mean, it's really the hard part is when it comes to the breakdown of data. So this is also the part that, you and I both are seeing in so many varying communities, where you've got people who are researching and they're looking at data. This I think is such an interesting category to explore, because this is going to poke a lot of holes into what researchers are relying on. So the questions that I would be asking a researcher is, okay, where did your data come from? And and that can vary. But if we're looking at the USDA government database, it would then be, okay, well, if we're talking about chickens, what farm, whether if it was specifically labeled as organic, what does that mean? Because organic doesn't mean that it was a regenerative based approach. And then with the chickens, what farm did it come from? How many years ago? How often is this being tested? So if it's a factory farm, that's always going to be a decline from year after year after year. It's the same thing as looking at the nutrients on any bag of carrots, that even if it's an organic farm, that if you were to test it year after year, but they're not regenerating their soil, they don't have animals to help, because animals are the fastest to rebuild topsoil, to put the biology back into the soil, to make all of these different interactions happen in order to create the nutrients in the soil to be absorbed, whether it be a vegetable or what the animals are eating, if it's the grasses and the grubs and that sort of a thing. So what are they basing that the nutritional profile off of? How accurate is that? Because that is always changing. And if you're getting that data from a regenerative based farm, then any regenerative based farmer, they're looking to improve their soils year after year instead of sustaining, because the word sustainable, that's out. It's no longer good enough to try and sustain what we have left. We have to regenerate if we're going to survive as humans, as animals, as insects, that whole thing. So when I look at this then as a whole, and listening to the communities talk about the omega-3s and the omega-6s and the ratios and the inflammatory process, well, having a regenerative farmer have their products tested, it is expensive. It is so pricey, and it's not, the food business is not a lucrative business where there's cash to be thrown around and getting things tested all the time. So people will be looking at farmers who are farming as similar as to what they're doing in order to bring together that data and have a general idea. So taking all of that is, how helpful is the data versus what is it like if you go visit a farm and you see the green, the lushness, of course, depending on the time of year. December's probably not ideal. But if you're going there and you're seeing the animals outside, you're seeing, their posture. I mean, you can tell when animals are happy, and you can see the biodiversity of, birds happen to be visiting the area. It's you're seeing the animals are happier. Everyone's probably going to be happier. And then the ultimate test is then when you're eating it and how you feel when you're eating it, how satiated you are. Do you have to eat more, or are you finding that you're eating less? And there's something with satisfaction. And so over the years, I've found myself, and it can be frustrating, but at the same time, really freeing when you find that the data isn't as helpful as it appears when find out that you yourself are the best litmus test on the quality of any product, and that even from within the farm, if something were to be off and a farmer didn't catch it, well, you as the tester and eater be like, wow, this tastes different, and I'm not sure, I don't know how I feel about it. That would be something worth looking into and paying attention to your internal database.
Absolutely. I agree. I think anecdotal evidence is so important. And I'm sure, I've heard so many people that are struggling with chronic illnesses or histamine intolerance go and shop at Northstar because they feel so good eating their meats. And that to me is a really strong evidence that there's a difference in the quality of the food and the nutrition that it offers.
So true. Yeah, it's really inspiring every time I see other people who are sharing their stories of using Northstar and just seeing the difference that it's made. And, even in my own experience, where even though I've known Northstar, it was one of the first farms that had been shared with me when I found uh, a group of like-minded individuals who are about eating and sourcing healing food from farms that really care about their soil and their animals. And so I heard about Northstar, I think about the end of 2007, and I never knew about their fresh meat program until until more recently, since I had jumped on board officially with Northstar last year. But it was one of those things where I kicked myself over and over and over again of how much more pleasant when my histamine issues were out of control, if I had known. But I love hearing the stories of everyone who is currently working through their chronic inflammation based issues and finding really good results with what we're providing and raising.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so much appreciated. And I'm really glad I found you guys because I've done so well with eating your meats. And it's a rare thing to find. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up is that something that I have noticed is that most of the pasture raised chicken that I've encountered personally is not corn and soy free. So, for example, I've called all the local farms around where I live, and none of them offer corn and soy free chicken. And so I guess I was just curious what your thoughts are on that sort of pasture raised chicken that they are fed corn and soy versus the factory farm chicken, because you go to those farms and the chickens look pretty happy, and obviously it's a much better situation than the factory farm, but they're not necessarily getting in the right nutrition.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. I work with a number of local farmers in where I live, which is in Minnesota in particular, and there is an organization called the Weston A. Price Foundation, and that's something Northstar Bison. They've been involved with the Weston Price Foundation even longer, well before I even discovered it, and it's a network of farmers who believe in helping rebuild the soil and get nutritious animals up to par with what our bodies need for nutrition. So with that, I've talked to a number of farmers, and it's becoming more and more common to find farmers who are at least going soy free.
Okay.
So that's encouraging. The corn component, that, as you painfully know, you're painfully aware of, that it's much more difficult to get that combination of corn and soy free. It's really hard to find. The farmers that I know who are doing soy free, but are still doing corn, they're doing organic corn. And it depends. I've heard different reactions from some of the people that I know who are dealing with inflammation issues, that they seem to do fine with the corn as long as it's part of the organic feed, but then not for everyone. So that is where, to be able to find farmers, so they're hopefully, what state are you in again? Was it North Carolina?
Yes, North Carolina.
The desire is for all of us to be able to find some local farmers. And we love at Northstar being able to provide for people top tier, top quality, nutrient dense foods And we also want you to know your local farmers, because we can't feed everybody.
I love that. Absolutely.
And we know that the more farmers that get into regenerative agriculture-based farming, the more everybody wins. Everybody's going to win. So, so looking up, people could go to the westinaprice.org website and look for a chapter leader. There's one not only in every state, but it's international. There's chapter leaders all over the world. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah. And so if you're able to find a chapter leader that's in North Carolina, then theoretically they should have a list of farmers that they've talked to that are going to have really high standards, and hopefully that could open up some doors while you're looking for different cuts, different things, looking for corn and soy free chickens and other items. So that's one thing. I know eatwild.com also has a listing of farmers who care about their soil, care about their animals. But yeah, the more farms you're able to visit, the more, I mean, I just have to stop and say, I am so impressed that you've been calling farms and that you've even been visiting them. I've been watching your adventures, and I love that you're visiting them, and what an incredible treasure trove that you're building up in your own mind and in your own body, as you're able to see and have your own database of finding out who's doing something that works and that's really great, and those that aren't, that could use some improvement. But the more questions that you're asking the farmers, it plants a seed in their mind to find that, oh, there might be a market for this. Oh, maybe I should try changing this. If she's willing to commit to maybe buying 10 or 20 chickens, maybe we'll take that risk. And, and that's how our farmers in our area have taken that chance. But ultimately, that was why Northstar Bison started having chickens raised this way, was because of customers calling in saying, where can I find chickens that are corn and soy free? And so we made that happen.
There's something about it, visiting a farm and seeing all the animals happy and just supporting that instead of going to the grocery store just feels good. And so, yeah, I'm just thankful to all the farmers that are committed to this regenerating the land like you talked about, because I think that's just really powerful. I was wondering if you could briefly explain what omega-6 to 3 ratios are and how it compares in conventional chicken to pasture-raised chicken.
Yeah. So at least from all the databases that I've looked at, it seems like the factory farm, the conventional, I've seen it in the 20-1, the omega-6 to 3 being the
Wow.
20-1 range, which is, yeah, what do you even say to that? But but then
So 6 is the more inflammatory, that's the bad
well,
inflammatory, or
yeah, and that's another category too. That's
okay.
interesting because, it's like going through the history of nutrition and marketing and how things, especially since the 50s, it seemed like when President Eisenhower had his heart attack, that really was the launching pad for let's demonize fat. And there's good fats, there's bad fats. There's good sixes, there's bad sixes, and now this one's crazy, but this really in the Weston Price Foundation world with omega-3s, it turns out when omega-3s and omega-6 ratios, it was maybe 10 to 15 years ago, it was especially being highlighted. A lot of the Weston Price based people went all out and trying to get as many omega-3s as they could. And I kid you not. I mean, after a few years, we had some practitioners within that foundation who started saying that their patients were actually having issues with too many omega-3s.
Wow.
You don't hear that, but that's where, people Well, we can't help but take things to the extremes just to see what happens.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's good sixes, there's bad sixes. Threes are, known as being great, but even that can be taken to an extreme. So at least then from pastured chickens and some of the data that I've seen, and it depends, because if they're eating, a lot of grains and maybe there's not a lot of grubs available during a particular season, that can alter the range that you're going to see of the 6-3 ratio. But I have seen it where someone had submitted their pastured chickens and who raised them very similarly to how we have ours raised.
Okay.
And it was a 5.6-to-1 ratio, which I wasn't expecting that. And but so that it can vary, and take that with a grain of salt, but that is
Significant difference.
yeah. So I would never expect chickens so much to be anything like a 1-to-1 ratio. I don't know how that could be done, and I'm not so sure it should be done.
Okay.
Because every animal, if they're given their ancestral diet, then that means they're going to produce it in its natural design accordingly.
Yeah, I love that idea, just that if animals are fed ancestrally and appropriately, that they should be good for us to eat, and that they shouldn't be inflammatory, and we don't necessarily need to avoid certain animals as long as they're raised appropriately. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and especially utilizing the entire animal, no matter whether it's a bird or, or a ruminant, but just that whole idea of the nose to tail type eating, because
Yes.
that is whole nutrition. When you're eating the entire animal, the organs, making use of the bones, that sort of a thing, then you're getting the totality of nutrition, because every different organ highlights different minerals, different fats, different nutrients, whatever it might be. So anyone avoiding or only eating chicken breasts, well, that's probably the least nutrient dense part of the animal. So it's that's another factor. So make use of the entire bird and get those gizzards in there too.
I love the idea of nothing going to waste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering what you would recommend to people if they either don't have access to corn and soy-free chicken, or if they can't afford it.
Yeah. So yeah, if they're not able to find it locally, we are so more than happy to provide that. The affordability part, that's also another one of those multifaceted type of questions and answers, because it's one of those where it goes back to the overquoted statement from Hippocrates: let food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. But there's so few options to find food that is medicinal anymore. We truly believe our food is medicinal, and when people are loaded up on nutrients, then the investment on supplements goes down, and hospital bills go down, because you're building a barrier of greater immunity. It's one of those for affordability. I get it. I remember being in that situation. I barely had a part-time job, and I was grateful for that. And I needed to get nutrient dense foods. And sometimes it's that creativity. If someone's really, really struggling with being able to afford nutrient dense foods, that can be where it's for Christmas, for birthdays, mentioning to parents or friends or something like that of, could I could I request a package of something, along those lines, and instead of a gift certificate for a store, but actually instead from a nutrient dense food source farm. So that really, it's the best investment. And so for some people, it may be just rearranging how their money is being spent, but it's also acknowledging that sometimes for some, the finances are really tight, and hopefully asking others for perhaps gifting for certain holidays might be another option too, to try and get creative. Do whatever it takes to get the best food, because it is worth it. I'm living proof, you're living proof. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the idea of it being an investment in your health. So that brings me to my next question, which is appropriately raised chicken beneficial for people healing from chronic illness and histamine intolerance? And should it be something that should be eaten a lot, or does it kind of depend person to person? How does that typically look for people that have chronic illness or histamine intolerance?
Yeah, I take the stance on variety is best, as long as every creature, whether it be fish, whether it be chicken, or any kind of poultry, any of the ruminant animals, pastured pork, everything in that category, as long as they're being fed according to their design, which is all individual, then we're going to benefit from it. And with that emphasis on making sure that our own diets, that we don't have glyphosate in there, because that's where, it literally is poking holes, it's boring holes into our bodies and our intestinal tract. And that was a huge issue with me. And so often when people are looking to hopefully cut corners or things like that, where it's the unseen things that are doing the most damage. So for chronic issues, definitely, I really think rotating as much. Actually, this goes back into that individualized response of what are you craving, and when you've had a taste of the real thing. And I know this has happened with me multiple times, and I know I'm not the only one, where you get a taste of the real thing. And especially when you're first starting out, and it's almost like you're dreaming about it, and you can't stop thinking about it, and you just have to get more of it. And it's almost like it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, almost, every meal it's incorporated, because you just can't get enough of it. And then finally it's like, okay, I want something else now, and if that ends up being chicken, if that ends up being, wild caught salmon, if it ends up being, the grass-fed, grass-finished bison, whatever it might be, that if your body is sending that signal of there's something in there, there's multiple things in there that I need, and I am going to make you think about it until you eat more of it and I get my fill. And it's a very unscientific, but very anecdotal type of approach to eating and healing, that you yourself are the best doctor. Nobody knows your body like you know it and how it responds. So no matter what data I would ever be able to dig up, is never going to be able to do better than what your body intuitively says. And for those who would say, I don't know what my body's intuitively saying, it's okay. It's one of those situations of learn how to reconnect with what you're thinking, what your thoughts are, and see where that goes, because nobody knows better than when you're eating the real thing. Now, if you're eating sugar and eating refined things, that does skew how your body interprets things. But if you get off of that, your body knows.
Absolutely. I think that's such a good point. Definitely. and just so you guys know, I know this video is talking about chicken specifically at Northstar, but Northstar offers such an amazing variety of meats that are all regeneratively raised, and just such high quality meats. Everything I've tried from there, I've done really well with. And so there's plenty of variety.
Yeah, there really is.
For sure. Okay, well, I was just hoping to wrap up with asking you, what do you think can be done to encourage farmers to move in the right direction towards feeding chicken and, of course, all other animals and livestock as nature intended?
Yeah. It's really the most important thing to do, which you are already doing, is exploring farms, asking questions of those who are raising your food and your nutrition. And so if everyone really got into that and really started calling their local farmers to find out that need, if people can connect even with finding or starting a local Weston Price chapter, then you've got power in numbers where people be like, hey, we're all looking for the same thing, and we have no farms in our area that are looking or that are currently doing what we're hoping for. Let's have a conversation. Let's see what's possible and see if we can encourage that. And the number one most important thing to shift this food culture is where we spend our money. And so sometimes people are trying to save money on certain meats, but I'm telling you, the cheaper meats are generally subsidized. Subsidized means the government sending the money. Government sending the money is not the government's money. That's your money and my money as taxpayers. And we didn't get to choose where our money got sent. And it's getting sent to places that are not raising food that's going to help regenerate the earth, that's not going to make healthy animals and not going to make healthy people. So it's an investment that if we're not spending money on factory farmed or, subsidized based foods, if we're not putting our money in that direction and we're putting it towards all the farmers that are, then they're going to see a market shift significant enough to go, we're either going to have to go out of business or we're going to have to change. And they may be more receptive. So where we spend our money is so important. It doesn't have to be at Northstar Bison. It just has to be regenerative agriculture, because we're in this as a community and not even a competition. It's so important that we shift our current situation with food and with the soil, and everybody wins when we put our money and our dollars towards those that care about everyone involved.
Awesome. I love that. And so basically just where we spend our money, spreading the word, and creating a demand.
Yeah, no picket sign will change anyone's mind. Money talks.
There you go. Yes, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us today, Becca. I've learned so much, and I know everyone listening will find this really insightful as well. Did you have anything else that you would like to share or add?
No, just besides what I've mentioned I love watching your journey. I'm so excited with seeing all of the things, whether little or big, that you're getting back in your life. And I'm just rooting for you, loving all the experiments with foods and dietary trials and things. So I'm just celebrating with your victories. I love what you're doing. And I know other people are really loving watching you heal up as well. So I'm just excited for you. So
thank you so much, yeah. Becca. I really appreciate it. You're
yeah.
So sweet. Okay, so I will link Northstar Bison's website and social media down below. Like we've discussed, Northstar offers amazing corn and soy-free chicken and all sorts of high quality meats. So if you're in the USA, definitely give Northstar a try. It's been one of my favorite places to source meats from. And I'll also link your Instagram account, Becca, so you guys can follow her as well. And thanks again for chatting with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I enjoyed our time. Yeah. Thanks, Rachel.
I hope you guys enjoyed the interview just as much as I did. Becca's so knowledgeable about regenerative farming and nutrition, and really makes me excited and inspired to continue learning more myself. One more thing I wanted to mention is that Becca and I will be doing another discussion about regeneratively raised and corn and soy-free pork in the next few months. So be sure to subscribe and be on the lookout for that interview. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next time.